Hey guys, welcome back to the Lit Mag Lab podcast. I'm Jazz Marie, aka of Naforo. So previously on the podcast, I was giving you a tour around Foglifter Journal and Press, yeah? And yeah, so you can listen back to that. Just a reminder, right? They're based out of San Francisco, California, and they do have a nonprofit status, nonprofit organization status, by the way. I don't think I mentioned that in that episode, so you can totally listen back to that. Even check out the previous episode, Chestnut Review, just showing you around, a couple different lit mags, journals, and presses out there. I think it helps, if you're going to start your own lit mag or journal or press to see examples of guidelines, website structures, things like that. So, yeah, and I just share my thoughts along the way and, some commentary around it. So, yeah, and speaking of Chestnut Review, so I think in episode 39, well, I think I mentioned my dad was like back in Minnesota, my home state, right? Growing chestnuts, but back then I think it was actually hazelnut, so I misspoke. Sorry, just a note there. I think it was hazelnut tree. So yeah, I do love chestnuts though still. Anyways, yeah, and fog lifter. So I try to mention things that names remind me of or memory clips on this, podcast, which is also an audio diary series of my journey in the lit mag world. So I do love fogs. I grew up in, Minneapolis, Minnesota. So I always liked the sight of fog. I thought it was always very cool, and things like that. But I'm not sure what led to fog lifter's name. But anyways, it's awesome. And yeah, so anyways, enough of that. We are going to get going here on after dinner conversation. You can see my screen out on YouTube, Spotify, and elsewhere. Yeah. And yeah, another thing I really love are short stories, right? On this podcast. So I've predominantly covered a lot of lit mags, journals, and presses that focus on, predominantly poetry, right? Prose, art, and some I've covered have fiction, right? Calls and things like that. But I think after dinner conversation is very unique, in terms of its focus and the spotlight on short stories. So I want to take the time to, check out their website. This is the first time I'm really digging further on their website a little bit more, than I have in the past. So yeah, some of this will be new to me or things I just point out. Yeah, so let's get started. So I'm gonna go to. We'll come back to the website, but we'll go to the after dinner conversation chill subs overview page. You can see here they've been bookmarked 1,495 times, and yeah, to date it looks like they have some votes here in terms of respectful editor, new writer friendly, great feedback, transparent process, voice driven gold, professional standards, and yeah, they are based out of Arizona in the US, yeah, and they've been around for 6 years, it looks like, founded in 2019. And yeah, so After Dinner Conversation is an award winning independent nonprofit publisher. They believe in fostering meaningful discussions among friends, family, and students to enhance humanity through truth seeking, reflection, and respectful debate. To achieve this, they publish philosophical and ethical short story fiction accompanied by discussion questions. Their monthly magazine is distributed through their website as well as bookshop.org, Amazon, Kobo, Barnes& and Noble, Libby, and local bookstores. They reprint short stories from their magazine to their 150,000 Substack subscribers and through relationships with Philosophy Now and Film London. They are supported in part through a grant by the Arizona Commission on the Arts and a member of CLMP. They are, yeah. And Colby Granville, I apologize mispronounce any names, is the editor and founder. Yeah. So that's really cool. Yeah, so you can see, they have a YouTube channel I've took a look at, which is really cool, and their podcast. And yeah, that's amazing. They have 150,000 Substack subscribers right to date. Probably more than that. I don't know when that was last updated, but that's really cool. And we have industry rankings here. So Erica Krauss top 500. It looks like 240 out of 500 rankings and change over the years, right? So Fishlish is 47 out of 1,830. Brecht top 1,000 pros 578 out of 1,000. So yeah, if you don't know what the fish list is or the industry rankings, don't forget you can take a look. I believe it was episode 61. Yeah, around the 60s. So you can listen back to that episode on the fish list and the other industry rankings. So yeah, we have the masthead here, and yeah, so it looks like there is a team here named. So that's cool. Yeah, their acceptance rate, guys. So it looks like the editor reported acceptance rate is showing 5%. Chill Subs tracker stats. So those who have tracked their submission, decision through Chill Subs tracker is 9.09%. The response time, editor reported, is 90 days. They try to get back with a decision. Average time has been 26 days, it looks like, for most submitters who have tracked right through Chill Subs. They do nominate for prizes, right? They publish reprints, they have print issues. There's no fee. Um, Payment is $75 per piece, so that's awesome. They do pay writers for their work. So let's take a look at the stats section. So again, this is just how many use Chill Subs tracker to keep tabs on their decision, and then it helps create a public acceptance rate from those who've submitted, right? And the more that do that, right, more accurate that can be. So accepted, it looks like 10, rejected 103, pending 26, withdrawn 5, didn't respond 4, and yeah. So yeah, it's helpful. I think that stat page, it gives others an idea of like the acceptance rate and things like that. So calls, right? So always open. They have this philosophy, ethical short story fiction call, and yeah, you can see up to 7,000 words, up to 3 pieces, and again, $75 per piece, no fee, which is really awesome. Yeah, so I think that's everything on the overview page, right? The vibe they're stating here is send us your best but less intimidating, and yeah. So let's head over to after dinner conversations duotrope page here real quick. Then we'll go back to their website. I just want to show you. So they do have a listing on duotrope, right? And it just covers rare traits, right? Things with the calls and what's open, right? And yeah, so again, duotrope's a great place to learn more about lit mags, drones, and presses calls. And you can get some, details on it. You can see it's been bookmarked as a favorite 212 times on Duotrope as of November 2025 here. And it has the publication median frequency, right? And yeah. So it's saying here there's a fees notice. We'll take a look at that, yeah, on Chill Subs, I think it says no fee. We'll see. We'll see. So it says for some submissions. So they have fast pass submissions, right? So yeah, I think it's for the fast pass they have, and we'll take a look at that in a bit. But yeah. There is a really cool editor interview that Duotrope has from 2023, about 2 years ago. And it's really helpful, these interviews with editors. I don't know if you've ever read them, and I've shared a couple, quotes off of them on this podcast because I think they are insightful. They can provide you more insight, again, into, what a publication is perhaps looking for, things to take into consideration before submitting. So here, Colby mentions, right, they do what nobody else does, right? Short stories. I'm quoting this from the interview, right? Short stories that ask ethical questions, right? This is great in that they have a very unique niche, but terrible because they get so many great submissions that aren't the type of thing they publish. They tell people over and over again they want the trolley problem in short story form. And yeah, you're probably like, what's the trolley form? Have you ever, you're probably like, what's the trolley problem? Have you ever heard of that? The advice here from the editor in chief, right? It states, read the Wikipedia entry for the trolley problem or the allegory of the cave. Then ask yourself, is the thing I'm submitting the kind of thing that can support a group of people talking for 30 minutes about the ethics, underlying philosophy of the choices the character is making? If that's not the case, they probably aren't a good fit for your story, even if it's the best story ever written. And yeah, it says their ideal submission would be 3,500, but they do have, a cap on, right? I think it was showing 7,000 words, right? But I think it was showing 7,000 words. And yeah, I think they even have a YouTube video on the editor talking about what they like to publish and things like that. So that's cool. Yeah. So I'm not going to read the whole interview for you guys, but it is very cool to read these, right, and helpful. So let's take a look at the trolley problem and the allegory of the cave. I don't know how many of you guys are aware of what that is, yeah, so just quoting this off of Wikipedia because I thought it was interesting. So the trolley problem, is a series of thought experiments in ethics, psychology, and artificial intelligence involving stylized ethical dilemmas in a scenario of whether to sacrifice one person to save a large number. The series usually begins with a scenario in which a runaway trolley, tram, or train is on course to collide with and kill a number of people, traditionally five, down the railway track, but a driver or bystander can intervene and divert the vehicle to kill just one person on a different track. Then, other variations of the runaway vehicle and analogous life and death dilemmas, medical, judicial, etc., are posed, each containing the option either to do nothing, in which case several people will be killed, or to intervene and sacrifice one initially safe person to save the others. So yeah, that reminds me of some movies I've seen. The whole case of how some movie characters. I think it happens in real life too. Where people have totally saved others, right? They put their life on the line to save a group of people. But we see it a lot in films too, and things like that. Fiction movies, fantasy movies too. And yeah, there's so many heartbreaking movies. I was just thinking about that too. That whole scenario of sacrifice. And yeah. So yeah, the trolley problem, that's what it is. And I thought that was interesting, how after dinner conversations mentions to check out the trolley problem and the allegory of the cave. So that is and quoting here on Wikipedia, so Plato's allegory of the cave is an allegory presented by the Greek philosopher Plato in his work Republic. It says 514a, 520a. And yeah, so I won't read through all of this, but in the quoting this, right, in the allegory, Plato describes people who have spent their entire lives changed by their necks and ankles in front of an inner wall with a view of the empty outer wall of the cave. They observe the shadows projected onto the outer wall by objects carried behind the inner wall by people who are invisible to the chained prisoners and who walk along the inner wall with a fire behind them, creating the shadows on the inner wall in front of the prisoners. The sign bearers pronounce the names of the objects, the sounds of which are reflected near the shadows and are understood by prisoners as if they were coming from the shadows themselves. So only the shadows and sounds are the prisoner's reality, which are not accurate representations of the real world. The shadows represent distorted and blurred copies of reality we can perceive through our senses, while the objects under the sun represent the true forms of objects that we can only perceive through reason. Three higher levels exist: natural science, deductive mathematics, geometry, and logic, and the theory of forms. So, yeah, and then it goes into your to Socrates and explanation, yeah, how the philosopher is like a prisoner freed from the cave and comes to understand that the shadows on the wall are not the direct source of the images seen. So a philosopher aims to understand and perceive the higher levels of reality. However, the other inmates of the cave do not even desire to leave their prison, for they know no better life. Socrates remarks that this allegory can be paired with previous writings, namely the analogy of the sun and the analogy of the divided line. So yeah, the imprisonment in the cave, that and departure from the cave. There's things here, return to the cave. You can read more about it. I think it's fascinating. Anyways, I like learning new things. So I wasn't, I've heard about that, the allegory of the cave, but my memory was fuzzy on Plato, so I had to reread this, and I was like, oh, that's what it was. Yeah. So I think that's interesting. Again, like the whole aspect of reality and images, projected onto a wall, and prisoners and the inmates. So you can read more about it. I will link anything in the description that I quote off of. But yeah, it's two things to keep in mind when we're submitting to after dinner conversations. I think that is pretty interesting. I never seen lit mag journal or literary magazine or press even really zone in on that, right? Like leveraging that as like, for submitters to think about that for inspiration behind their work, when they're keeping it in mind, things like that, various scenarios, various realities, different, things that sort of are, you could consider like mind bending and twisting, right? You think about the different, like, option A, option B, option C, or this happens, or maybe, the why, right, behind things, right? So when you're writing a short story, right, the reason behind it, what we can tell and communicate, we can show and communicate a lot of really wonderful messages through short stories, and really get your mind, turning and gears turning, different things, like that. I remember, throughout school, right? We would, whenever you read like a book or a chapter, right? Or there are different interpretations of, like, what if they did this instead? Or what if they did that instead? That whole aspect of, different routes in life, and different, what if you did something different in the timeline, or with a choice you have choice A, B, and C. I don't know, I was just thinking about it. So a series of choices, before you, right? And a dilemma, right? A problem. I think that is interesting. So yeah, we are going to go back to After Dinner Conversations website here, and you can see on their homepage, right? They were rated most popular fiction magazine 2024. They were rated most popular fiction magazine of 2024 by Chill Subs, rated top lit mag of 2023 and 24 by Chill Subs, rated number one, the very best literary magazine by Ranker, and rated top 50 fiction on Substack. So yeah, they have this Venn diagram, which is really interesting, right? It says great writing, philosophy, and ethics, short story, right? And then at the center of that is After Dinner Conversation magazine. Yeah. So I think what's really nice, if you scroll down, right, they offer this free sample. And totally, at some point in time, I think I was following After Dinner Conversations, and I got a message about the free sample too. And I think it was a couple years back, but it was really cool, the sample that they have, that's free. And anyways, After Dinner Conversations, I don't think their issues are, they're really cost friendly, so, you can see they have a flash sale right now at the top banner. I don't know if you guys can see this, but sometimes it gets cut off. 3 months, $1 a USD discount code, for 3 months, which is really cool. And yeah, so that free digital sample is awesome. They have a reviewer print sample too, and that's Colby Granville, the editor in chief. And yeah, so again, it reiterates, meaningful discussions, right? Truth seeking, reflection, respectful debate. So I think, that was bringing me back to, I was thinking back to sometimes in one of my classes, way back in high school when I was younger, right? We had this debate, we had to, I was selected to do the debate, apparently, in the group, because no one else wanted to do it. But I remember I had to prepare these flashcards, right? And I can't remember what the subject matter was, but I think we were talking in the perspective of a character, like how they would approach a situation. We were asked questions by, like, our the classmates, right? And we would have to think on our feet to respond and debate a topic amongst the other characters, right? And it was very interesting, and I was like super nervous, and I did my best. We were allowed to have, some cards, some notes, some initial thoughts or things like that, which was nice. So yeah, that was like interesting, a debate, and some kind. And I think debates are really fascinating. Everyone has, whenever they read something, right, they think about it, right? What if this was done differently? What if they did that instead? Or these are the results of that, the consequences of this action, or in the story, or from some short stories have, a focal point of a character or characters in it, or people, right? And I think philosophical discussions are really can be really in depth and complicated, right? They can take your mind to a whole nother place, right? And I think it's really really cool, how, if you go online, right, even just in general, right, a thing a lot of us as human beings discuss are movies, right? But within those movies, right, are stories, the character development, and everything. And same thing can be said of short stories, and stories in general, right? We can dissect them and really get in depth with them, and really do a breakdown of them, really cool, like the analysis of a short story. It doesn't matter really, in terms of a story, how long or short it is. You can still dissect it, learn from it, and discuss it, amongst, anyone really. I think in some cases they're totally short stories I've read. I run a lit mag and drone press, right, too, myself. But I've read, I was like, we think about, things that could elevate a short story, right? Sometimes it comes down to detail or removing unnecessary dialogue, right? And also, the development of it. In the case of after dinner conversations, right? They really have a zero in, it looks like, on philosophy and ethics, and things like that. So, I think that's really, really cool. Yeah, so short stories for long discussions, I think that's interesting. They do have their ISSN number here, visible. So I have an episode where I was discussing ISSN. Again, you can listen back and do a keyword search on that if you're curious on what that entails. But again, they are nonprofit, 501c3. Each issue, it says here, features both established writers and upcoming authors, again, who contribute fascinating philosophical insights on controversial topics like marriage equality, assisted suicide, the meaning of death, animal rights, and defining a purpose. Yeah, so so I think that's nice that they really highlight that, topics that really get others going, engaged in discussion. And there are so many, in existence in the world, that you could, do a focus on in a short story in that way, in that manner. The list goes on beyond that. So I think that's really, really cool focus and interesting. Yeah, so deep thought, right? And really thinking about a short story from top to bottom, and what happened in it. Reflection, I think, is important when you're reading a piece, to discuss and all of that. I think that really is important, even with poetry, right? And prose, other forms of writing, even art, right? You can do a lot of long discussions over it too. What a poem means, right? Totally. Throughout our lives, I think we've dissected poems and things like that, others in history and time. There are a lot of really, short stories from the beginning of time. Some of the earliest short stories and earliest pieces of writing, those have a lot of long discussions over, totally, and things like that, in terms of, a fiction world too, and nonfiction, right? But yeah, they focus on, fiction, short stories appears here. So that's awesome too. Yeah. So yeah, you can see those are some of the issues, it looks like, right? The right here, right? So $2.45 digital subscription issue, and then print subscription issue is showing $12.95 an issue. Yeah, they have a themed book series, a seasoned book series, best of book series. So that's cool, Yeah. So they have, it looks like, 250,000 plus readers. And yeah, and then that's the Philosophy Ethics Short Story Literary Magazine, right? They have After Dinner Conversation Themes, which is a collection of their short stories previously published in their monthly magazine with a common theme, a common story theme: tech ethics, bioethics, government ethics. After Dinner Conversation Best of Series, so a print collection of the very best philosophy and ethics short stories as decided by their readers, published in the After Dinner Conversation series. They have an anthology series, so it's a print collection of past philosophy and ethics short stories year by year, published again in the After Dinner Conversation series. And yeah, so they have a podcast series too. It looks like an audiobook readings and discussions in their weekly podcast, and they have a print book conversation too. So distribution partners, if we scroll to the bottom here, this is really cool. So I think After Dinner Conversation, ADC, right? So they have gotten in through quite a few distribution partners here, right? We have Zinio, I mentioned that on the podcast, and Readly, I mentioned on the podcast, Flipster, Libby, Hoopla, and the Philosophy Documentation Center. They also have audiobooks on Amazon and Audible. You can again order print editions on Amazon, bookshop.org, or through, a local bookstore, wherever ebooks are sold, right? And individual issues from Amazon, Apple, Barnes and Noble, and Kobo. So yeah, I think it really helps to offer, publications again, just reiterating this as ebooks. I discussed not too long ago, I'm mentioning it again because I think you guys totally should check it out. What Brie is doing, BRIET, right? The ebook distribution is really neat, right? In that episode, getting publishers in front of more libraries and schools, right? And their ebook marketplace, aside from already exist with, you know, uh, Kobo and Amazon Kindle and stuff, right? So it's really cool, the Brie marketplace. But yeah, if you're interested, if you're looking to start your own lit mag journal and listening to this, or someone who's looking for a place to get digital subscriptions, or facilitating that, or making your publication interactive, don't forget, on this podcast I try to circle back just to mention episodes you guys should check out. So I think it was episode right, 20, where I was showing how to or just discussing in that one audio, right? How do you set up print and digital subscriptions, episode 20. And then episode 33 was PDF flipbook readers for publications, creating an interactive experience for readers, flipping through, so it's not just a static PDF, right? And then I was also covering in episode 62, right, exact editions, right? They help, in terms of digital magazine issue subscription solutions. Episode 63 was more physical distribution, right? Astros and books. And then also I think episode 67, I was discussing the other various distribution methods I was aware of, in terms of physical, places out there. Again, they have to vet your publication for most platforms nowadays, right? Whether you get into some of the, you know, um, places where others can purchase, digital subscriptions. And in typical places have, some places, Brie is nice because, right, they give everything 100% back to the publisher in terms of sales, but other places like, you know, um, I mentioned like digital subscription places, right? Some of them have a split, again, just mentioned this, like 60-40 between the publisher and the platform, or sometimes it's 50-50 or 70-30, 60-40. So it's a little bit different in every place, in terms of that. I'm not sure on exact editions and some other things, but even with some distribution partners, right, they take a percentage away. So you can listen to those episodes again, 63, 62, 67, 20, and 33. Those may help you, and definitely look at the description links at the bottom of those. May help you find some more places to distribute issues further, or even if you're someone who likes reading, great way to pick up issues digitally, or to find where to pick up issues and things like that too. Yeah, so at the bottom, they have a privacy policy, customer service, distribution disclosure, customer account, Substack links, masthead. Yeah, so the privacy policy, I talked a little about the importance of privacy policies on this podcast a little bit. But, if you're going to start your own literary magazine, journal press, take some time to read a couple different privacy policies, terms of service, conditions, on different sites. Not all lit mags and journals have that, but I think it's a good idea too. If you're running a literary arts magazine, you're working with distribution partners, you have, mailing list subscribers, I think it's important to have that. And yeah, in terms of, covering distribution and all of that stuff, right? I think it's important. So take some time to read those. I won't read those on the podcast, of course, because it can be a bit long. But, I think it helps to see examples, if you're creating your own terms and privacy policy for your website, right? And yeah, so the masthead, I'm going to click on that. So yeah, so again, they have a board of directors here. Their mission statement, right, is here visible. Their value statement, always important to have, your mission statement and what you focus on, right, when you're starting your lit mag journal and press. If you're going to start your own, just reiterating that. That masthead here. So it looks like there's a team, right? They have a story editor, Substack editor, copy editors, graphic designer, and yeah, very cool. They have associate acquisition editors and social media director, grant writer, magazine layout. So yeah, they have a really awesome team. It looks like, So every lit mag journal is a little bit different. Some places have teams again, or some have volunteer staff, or some have paid staff. It looks like for associate acquisition editors, right? It states here a note. You will need to have been a volunteer reader for at least 20 stories over a period of at least 3 months before applying for consideration. So yeah, and then they have at the bottom partnerships, right? They're a member of CLMP, right, and the other ones I mentioned earlier, right? Arizona Commission of the Arts, and yeah, and Film London, Philosophy Now, and Wisdom's Edge Foundation Inc. And then they have a thank you note to others here. So yeah, that's really cool. Let's check out the magazine subscriptions section of the site. So yeah, look guys, it's showing $7.35 every 3 months, right? Digital. Again, I shared this, right? The $24.95 every 12 months. So I think that's really reasonable, to be honest. In terms of the subscription, and things like that. Philosophy, ethics, short story, digital, and catalog is $8.95 every 3 months. And you can see they have it on an ebook reader, right? Showing an example. Looks like they have some sales on sometimes too. So yeah, so you can choose different, different subscription plans. So I think it's nice to give options. I don't see a lot of places really do that. Different level subscriptions. So I think they do a good job of that. Yeah, like quarterly and yeah, print, digital, and catalog option, and yeah, and they have like a full package one, it looks like. So yeah, I think their highest one is showing $129.50. So I think that's the entire thing, right? Yeah, let's click on it. I'm just curious what that looks like. So it looks like they have free shipping and handling, shipping only to USA, Canada, United Kingdom, Republic of Ireland, Australia, Germany, Spain, France, and Italy. You can order back issues, and yeah. Um, so yeah, that's cool. So yeah. So that's awesome. They do have a lot of reviews on Amazon too. I was looking at, and yeah. So yeah, there are different subscription packages. You can take a look, but I think all in all, the ones that they have are very reasonable, very cost and budget friendly. Sometimes subscriptions can be quite hefty. And I shared on this podcast, right? What some literary arts magazines do, not after dinner conversation, but when you submit to them, right? Instead of a fee, right? Some places have it where you get a subscription, and that entails being able to submit without any fees for the year. Some places have that, and I've totally or sometimes you enter a contest, right? And there's a contest fee with some lit mags and journals, right? And when you do that contest fee, you automatically get a subscription because of that contest entry fee. So that's how I got some lit mags and journals, when I was starting out, submitting places, right, in the mail and stuff. So, yeah. Anyways, I think it's nice. Again, they have a variety of options for, readers and subscribers or those who want to pick up issues. Yeah. So they have themed books here. I'm just going to show you the pages. I won't read everything off, but it looks like there are, PDF files, EPUB, MOBI files, right? So, suitable for tablet readers. And yeah, so that's really cool. So yeah, they have some really neat cover art here. And yeah. So yeah, it's showing $9.95 for these, the themed digital downloads, right? So it's a very organized layout. We have best of books. I'm just gonna click on these pages and show you guys. Yeah. So those are $4.99. So yeah, very, very reasonable, cost wise. That's I think, if you're gonna start your own literary magazine journal, it helps to see, the various pricing that some magazines have around them, the page count and things like that. But digital is typically, gonna be less expensive, of course, than print physical copies, right? We have back catalog magazines. So yeah, that's what that looks like. This page here. Back issue access for subscribers only. So yeah, this one, some lit magazine journals have password protected, for subscribers only. Back catalog access, back issue access. I think it's the same thing, right? Yeah. So yeah, they have a Substack weekly story email. We'll take a look at their Substack in a bit here. Substack revisions and revelations, right? Then Readly. Yeah, so they are in Readly, right? So Readly is really cool. I did reach out to Readly at one point in time, but I think when I did so, right, they were on a publisher onboarding freeze, right? They wouldn't take any publisher at the time. I don't know if that has passed or anything like that, but I know Readly, I think, and Caffeine had some sort of something happened. I don't know if it was an acquisition or partnership of some kind. Anyways, you know yeah, so if you run a literary arts magazine or journal, right, definitely look into some of the digital subscription, there are apps and platforms, web and mobile, that you can get your publication into, right? However, they have to vet it, right? Some places have no fee to join, and they just take a percentage of sales. Every place is a little bit different. But yeah, I highly recommend you look into some of those episodes I mentioned earlier if you're curious, because there are other ones out there besides, really tons of other ones, but very few ones that are free, no charge to publisher to upload. Really, I think was, if I recall, one of those that had no cost at all to join. Caffeine and some other ones out there, right? Yeah, but for the most place I came into contact with, I think just like three out there, or four, right, that had no cost to publishers to be a part of once they were approved, right, for the digital library and subscriptions. So yeah, I think Readly's awesome. If you've never checked out Readly, totally, they have, again, an app, and you can come across other really cool publications, on Readly. So yeah, maybe one day I'll circle back to Readly, and see, yeah. So yeah, so it's pretty cool, So yeah, they have other magazines, on Readly, all kinds, I don't know how many literary magazines are on Readly. I'm just curious. Let's type literary magazine. I don't know how many others are on it. So yeah, I don't see a lot of literary magazines on Readly, and the same thing can be said about some other places. Yeah, so I don't see a whole lot in terms of lit mags and journals on here, but that doesn't mean you can't join it, right? Yeah, they really just have to vet and assess. Sometimes when you reach out to some of these places, in terms of digital subscription platforms, mobile and web. Yeah. Anyway, so let's go back here. So, yeah, they also are part of, it looks like, EBSCO and Flipster. I think with EBSCO recently, I don't know if they have, if you're not familiar with EBSCO, I have memories. I was thinking about EBSCO back in, college days, right? We would have to do all research papers and things like that, and, cite our sources, and, leverage EBSCO and all of that. So, yeah. Anyways, I think EBSCO, I don't know if I reached out to them, but I know quite a lot of publishers have gotten into EBSCO, and flips. So yeah, that's EBSCO. So you can see here, right? So yeah, I think it's nice to be able to, get publications into places like EBSCO, Readly, more distributors, right? So if you're starting a literary magazine and journal, typically what these platforms like to see is that you've established your series, right? And things like that. With Dippity, we were able to get into one place, right? As I shared on this podcast, right? But we had about 5 issues at the time, right? So yeah, we're doing a relaunch, but so a different direction, a slightly different. But yeah, you want to have some examples and samples to show places typically, and have a series built out. Some places, I reached out to, I think, I can't remember if it was Libby or Overdrive. It may be one or the other. I can't remember if they're tied or not, but I think they are. So yeah, some places were like, your series isn't large enough yet. It's not, scaled enough to be able to give us a publisher account to, upload ebooks. They're like, you could go do other routes to get in front of libraries and some of these other ebook, distribution places. So that's why I think Brie is really cool, and also, there are, draft to digital exists and things like that, but there are a lot of different routes you could go about it. But I think it, when you reach out to places, sometimes you'll get no's, sometimes you'll get yeses, and sometimes you can totally restructure your publication. If you're doing a relaunch and things like that, it may help But a comment I got from a lot of places, and I think, literary arts magazines in general and things like that, I think a lot of people till today don't really see them. A comment I got, and it doesn't matter, in terms of poetry or short stories, but a comment I got again was like, oh, it's not popular among, our audience. It's not going to be popular in the marketplace. For some places, totally told me that internationally and elsewhere. I think it's really hard to get into, physical shops and things like that. But there, I think more and more, the digital libraries are going to continue to grow and grow. And it is tough to get in distribution places, but you got to just try and reach out. Like we were able to get into at least one, and I think after dinner conversations got into quite a few places distribution wise. So that's really cool to see. So it's possible. It just shows it is possible. You just got to keep at it. There are a couple places out there. I mentioned this podcast. If you listen to the series, right, that are free, right, to have distribution partners, and some just take a percentage of the sales, or some give you 100% back, not all. But yeah. Anyways, so just mentioning that. Yeah, so that's cool, right? They have a lot of distribution partners. They're in a lot of different places. It looks like. Um, so submissions, right? Let's take a look at submissions now, like how the structure is. You know, so yeah, so it says they do accept unsolicited submissions. However, they can be continued overwhelmed by submissions. So response time can take 2 to 3 months. And it says if you would like a response in 3 to 5 days, please consider using their FastPass system. So this is one way, FastPass, and we have this at the Dippity Lit Mag too, right? It used to be called the Tomorrow People ticket at Dippity Lit Mag after one of my favorite CW series, but it was like for, it used to be a 3-day response or 24 hours with us when I had started it, but no longer able to do that. So now it's just called the Splash Pass that we have at Dippity, right? So essentially that entails you would get a response back, skip the line within 1 to 2 weeks, right, from an editorial decision. And, some can request even reader comment shares from our team, initial thoughts, separate from detailed feedback options. But I think fast passes are nice. I see a lot of literary magazines and journals incorporate them, and, for additional fee, you can skip the line. So yeah, as they said, with their fast pass, you can jump to the front of the line, right? Or, if you're, it says a yearly digital print subscriber, the benefit of that is your story is always moved to the front of the line. So yeah, they have, online submissions form. We'll click on that and take a look. But so yeah, it shares their process a little bit here. Your story will go to a first line reader. If it clears the first reader, it will go to a larger group for discussion. And assuming you clear that, your story goes to their editor final approval, right? So that's pretty typical. And yeah, so yeah. Um, so then, if your story is accepted, they send an author agreement, a simple contract, granting right to publish your story. And yeah, so they have the agreement, example here. Let's click on it. I'm just curious what it pulls up. So yeah, this is the agreement they have, that's other sign, it looks like. So that's interesting, the sample they have. So just keep in mind, I mean, not all literary magazines will have you sign an agreement every time you have an acceptance. Sometimes it's just an agreement checkbox or something, typically presses, chapbook places, right? They do, have an agreement, right? Because they're selling, a chapbook, right? There's an agreement over whether or not there are royalties, whether or not, it goes back all to the publisher for future, publications in the series, or to support the publication's growth further, right? But yeah, I think that's nice. They show a sample of their contract, their agreements. Others are aware, of what that entails. And yeah, so it helps to see examples. So I think you absolutely do need contractual agreements if you're working with artists and things like that, or you have a chapbook series. But just keep in mind, not if you're a submitter, right? Not all places are going to have you sign an agreement or things like that. But sometimes when there's payment involved or royalties, typically there is, things like that. So I think that's nice that they do that. So it's very organized and they have examples, right? So, yeah, and then yeah, so if your short story does end up getting accepted and published, right, it gets in the magazine, then 2 is available for consideration, their yearly paperback Best of the Year anthology. It comes out in the spring, and 3, it says sometimes on their website. Additionally, the short story will be considered for inclusion in their podcast discussions or audio podcast readings. So they really try to showcase the work further, and for consideration other places, it looks like. So what are they looking for? Yeah, so yeah, they have this expanded a little bit. And I mentioned the trolley problem and the allegory of the cave, right? So they have a video you could watch. I'm not going to click on it, but and things like that. They have some example short stories they've published, right? The waiting room. I'm just going to click on that. I wonder. So yeah, it looks like they have, example short story here, right? Um, yeah, so that's cool that they give examples, for others to read. Like, hey, you're wondering what we're looking for here? Some examples to read. They point you in the direction. I think that's really cool that they do that. I don't see a lot of places do that. Most places are just like, yeah, read past work, check out our issues, but they give specific examples to look at, right? You know, um, One of them is a children's story. It looks like, yeah, example they have too. So yeah, take some time, totally. Some publishers do that. They give examples. Even on Chill Subs, I think there's a way, right, to share editor examples and stuff, links and plugins too. So that's helpful, for those who come across the publication listing or listen to the podcast, right? Yeah. So they state here, I'm quoting this, they don't care, if it's, sci-fi, fantasy, romance, contemporary, women's fiction, historical fiction, Western, or whatever, but the short story should have a deeper point for a longer discussion. 90% of what they turn down is not because of the quality of writing, but because it's simply not the kind of thing they publish again. Yeah, so they state here, right, their acceptance rate is showing 3%, right? I can't remember on Chill Subs, what was it showing there? So editor reported was 5%. So I'm not sure. It's about the same still. I don't know when this was last updated, but 3% and stories in the 2,500 to 4,000 word range seem to do better with their readers. They do not accept novels, poems, or artwork, right? So strictly, right? Strictly short stories, right? Yeah, short story fiction. So, yeah, so there's an ethical question stories, you're not looking for, right? So yeah, it states here, are there ethical question or stories you are not looking for, in a question mark here? So um yeah, so there are a few common topics missions, they aren't saying they won't accept anymore, but we will, but they would have to have a special twist, right? All things being equal, they are more apt to take a new idea over yet another. They don't want to, yeah. But most publishers, again, don't want to see things they've seen before, over and over again, right? So they state like, going back in time to warn or change the past. Yeah. So yeah, you can see the list on my screen here. I won't read through all of it, but yeah. I think that's nice that they do that, and outline that, right? So, submissions they see weekly and what they typically get, right? Yeah. So, what length are we looking for? Children's stories under 1,500 words, young adult, right, under 3,500 words, adult 1,500 to 7,000 words, right? And yeah, so what are the submission formatting requirements? Submit as a PDF, 12-point font, 1.25 to 2.0 spacing. They said they struggle with single space, but yeah, just basically formatted. It says it's easy to read. Again, they pay, short stories from unsolicited submissions, $75 that are accepted, right? Um, yeah. So, they mentioned some notes regarding reprints, right? It says make sure you're not in violation of any agreements. It says it's one thing for your story behind a paywall or in a print magazine. It's another for it to be freely available. If it is on a website and can be found and read online via Google search, they are not interested in it. It says, yeah. So again, it takes 2 to 3 months to hear back, right? So the fast pass submission process, that gets you priority reading for $17 in a response in 3 to 5 business days, right? So yeah, I think that is I think at one point in time, I can't remember if they raised this or increased this. I can't remember if it was lower than that in the past. But anyways, sometimes places change their fast pass amounts and restructure things. We've had fast passes. I've seen some places have like a $10 fast pass, $11 even. Every place is a little bit different, so it goes towards the publication, right? Paying writers to work and keeping the publication going and doing more projects, right, and series. So, um, Yeah, it says what percent of published stories come from your website submission process. It says 100%. Yeah, yeah. The only way anyone gets into their magazine is by blind submission, right? So that's nice. Um, so they have an AI submissions note here. So after dinner conversation generally does not accept writing generative AI software because their literary press and magazine, are venues for intentional and thoughtful human creativity. Yeah, so human based, right? Again, I mentioned this on a Chestnut Reviews episode, so yeah, always a good idea to have a FAQ section again, and mention AI, what your policy is around it. um and can you get feedback on your submission? So they do provide a few sentences of feedback from volunteer readers with each rejection. They said if you would like more personalized, detailed, developed feedback, they offer a service from their amazing story editor for a $65 fee. So, you can purchase story feedback and submit through their regular process, right? So, yeah. Anyways, let's click on this story feedback, what that looks like. So, yeah, $65. Yeah. So, again, every place has a little bit different, feedback fee, detailed, yeah. I'm not sure how long that feedback would be, if it's 1 to 2 pages or a couple paragraphs. I think that's my only thing there. So, I don't know if it said it here or did I miss it? Um, Yeah. So, anyways, they have some reviews here on their feedback. So that's nice, that we have feedback reviews here. This is recent, June 27, 2025. So that's nice that they do that because oftentimes I think with a lot of lit magazine journals, right, there aren't, reviews on feedback and, things like that to really gauge that besides, maybe chill subs rating, in terms of that. So that's nice that they have a section there for, experience, submitter experiences in terms of feedback, detailed critique, Um, yeah. So that's they have light editing, it says, following Chicago Manual of Style guidelines. And yeah, so that's nice, yeah. So I think that's it. That's their FAQ page, yeah. So I think I covered all of that. So yeah, that's their submissions FAQ page. This is their FAQ page, right? So, about the publication, yeah. And so it states here, so in terms of questions, right? So are these stories designed to teach morals, right? The stories and discussion questions should be used to refine your own ideas through reflection and conversation with others who have read the same story. For some, the basis of those ideas may be based in religion. For others, it will be based in secular ethics. The important thing is you know why you think what you think. So, yeah. It goes into some other questions here. I won't read all of their FAQ, but you can see it on my screen, right? So, yeah. It says some stories are for children, and things like that. Their typical story is PG or PG-13, and they include a content disclosure at the start of each story. Um, the stories for children are shorter, G-rated, and ask questions that are age appropriate. The stories for young adults and older tend to be a bit longer and ask harder questions. They also may be rated R, or R rated if it serves the story. So yeah, the submissions page, we'll check it out, and they have information on how to, update, billing and stuff. So I'm gonna go to their submissions form here. We're gonna take a look at it. Yeah, so it looks like they have submission information, YouTube videos. That's nice. Yeah. And let's click on this. So yeah, I think they changed this. I can't remember if they were on. So yeah, it looks like they have a submission form set up here. Every lit mag and journal is a little bit different. Some have submission management systems or have submission forms, built in to the page, right? So that's nice. So yeah, this is the submissions form. We scroll down here, you can see it, right? So name field, email address, story name, word count, story summary, ethical question, right? Yeah, and yeah, and then no spam submissions, right? Just a reminder. Yeah, a lot of lit magazine journals get spam submissions, so I think just a fair warning to others, right? It's not a spammy submission. Make sure you're not spamming lit magazine journals. It just makes more work for editors and the team, right? And they have the fast response here. So actually, it's showing $25. So maybe that part of the site wasn't updated quite yet. So I think it's not 17, it's 25 or 3 to 5 day response. So I think they increased that. I think in the past it was lower, I will say. And yeah, places sometimes change their, feedback fees, or, additional reader notes and, things like that. So yeah, they do have an option to share reader notes and comments. And that's what we do at Dippity, right? For a small additional fee, we can share the reader comments and scoring of it. Yeah, so the fast pass I think is kind of on the higher side. I would say $25 is a bit high, but it's a 3 to 5 day response. But yeah, I've seen some places have a little bit lower than that. I think it was lower with after dinner conversations in the past. I thought it was under $20 in the past, like I saw on their site, and a bit lower than 17 earlier. But things change with places, so yeah. And then a PDF, right? And yeah. So yeah, again, I think after dinner conversations has a Squarespace based site on the back end. There are different ways you could set up a submission form. I cover in this podcast, right? And different episodes, various submission management systems, and I have a comprehensive episode that you guys can check out, of course, right? I think submission forms, are, they keep it organized, but I think submission management systems are, I'm a fan of them over form based, systems and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm trying to remember what episode that was, in terms of submission management systems. So I think it was episode 56, where I was sharing which submission management systems I'd recommend, for literary magazine presses. Dipty's on Subfolio. I would highly recommend Subfolio. I think it's very cool. A thing I really love about submission management systems, again, I think is that quite a few have discover pages, discover opportunity pages, like Submittable does, Subfolio does, and Duosuma, right, through Duotrope, affiliate of Duotrope, right? Yeah, so a lot of traffic goes through those discover opportunities pages, right, quite a bit, and others can find your calls that way, Submittable, Subfolio. So I like it. You can see other publications, other calls, and others can search and filter. But yeah, submission forms, I think it's important to have some sort of, organized system. I think it's better than just email, a form of some kind. But yeah, every place is a little bit different. I've showed you on this podcast, right? The different submission management systems they have, the different, intake systems, right? But yeah. So yeah, just a note here, right? It looks like they increased their fast pass, $25 USD. I think that's again on the higher side, but every place is a little bit different in terms of that. And yeah, in terms of feedback, critique I shared, but yeah, so it's totally okay to restructure things to your publication in terms of fees and stuff, like Dippy Lit Mag, right? We discontinued, all fees, right? We just have like reader comment shares, additional feedback options paid, right? Things like that. Dippy Press, we still have fees though. So yeah, Dippy Lit Mag is relaunching. We're hoping to do that. So we do intake short stories, but predominantly we've had more poetry submissions than short story submissions overall, and flash fiction, over the years. And yeah, this year it's been a focus of flash fiction for us at Dippity Lit Mag. But yeah, anyways, so that's their FAQ page. I didn't read every single thing, so just be mindful. I try to cover some main points. Always reread the guidelines despite whatever, I may say. Sometimes things change, some publications, but typically places have been, again, around for, several years. Things stay the same, Um, yeah, so again, they have samples, really nice. They have their podcast. Let's check that out. Podcast audiobooks. So I think it's nice, for literary arts magazines to have, podcasts. I really like, hearing discussions and hearing stories read and things like that. I haven't listened to their podcast yet. However, I will check it out after this. I'm totally you should too as well. I'm not sure how many episodes they have, or, when, how long it has continued, or if it's on a break or anything like that. But it looks like this one's from 2023. Nevertheless, that's really cool. Not a lot of places I see do audiobooks and, additional podcast discussions. There are quite a few out there, but not a ton. in terms of, I think, the short story world, yeah, so that's cool, so I think it helps to listen to podcasts too, to get an idea of like the work that's been published, to the dissection of it, discussion around it, even if it's, from the past, I think it helps, is very helpful to do that. Everyone sort of, some people prefer listening to podcasts or hearing, things read and discussed, or some prefer reading text based, but I like hearing things out, yeah, and then they have some random things. So yeah, I like that. They say it's random things here. So they have hosted events, really cool. So yeah. Um Host your own after dinner conversation, right? So yeah, so they're just stressing the importance of like, yeah, discuss it, in classrooms, book clubs, family discussions, right? Local meeting place, your home, and talk about it, right? Facilitate meetups, I think it's important to totally, discuss the work that is published, or whether it be short stories or not, writing in general, art, I think it's important to have discussions around it, right? I think that's so important. And yeah, so that's cool, right? They have a virtual book club. What is that? So yeah, it looks like they have after dinner conversation meetups in Arizona. Yeah, so that's cool, right? Yeah, that they facilitate that, have discussions and members. It looks like there's 79 members in this group, and there's even ratings on it. So Tempe, Arizona, yeah. So yeah, that's nice. On meetup.com. So yeah, some lit magazine journals, presses, even they do some events and meetups locally, which are really nice. I think, connect with others locally in the community. And yeah, you're bound to find meetups and events, in your area, wherever you may be in the world. So I think they can help, getting comfortable discussing, work, sharing it, reading, even. I think it's very helpful. I know a lot of poets in the community, right? Do, for example, open mic events and things like that. But short story events, or discussion conversations, and I think that's really cool. Ethics, short story discussions, and meetups, right? Group discussions, right? For stories published by After Dinner Conversation magazine, right? I think they do a good job of highlighting the importance of discussion over, the short stories, right? Yeah. So yeah, in fiction, and yeah. So what else do we have here? We have lesson plans for educators. So yeah, they have a ready to use lesson plan even. So yeah, that's awesome, So they have different ones for grade levels. It looks like grade 2 to 4. Bunny racing, I like the names of these. So as you wish, grade 3 to 5. A community of peers, grade 7 to 9. And yeah, so I think, yeah, they have yeah, various grade 9 to 12, right? um Different ones. I think these are, yeah, so they have, oh yeah, the waiting room. So they have different short stories suggested for discussion in their lesson plans with the grade levels here. The waiting room, as I shared earlier, right, 9 to 12. Tons of others, right? College level, even, right? Discussions. So yeah, I think it's really important, in terms of classrooms, whether, no matter what age, right? um, you know um, early, there are children's short stories, there are ones for college, all ages, right? And you can have some really cool discussions around that, dissections, and learn from them. It looks like most plans, it says 45 to 70 minutes. They have some free ones here, so these are like 99 cents here, really reasonable, $1.49, yeah. The $0 one, as you wish. So they have, this one, right, is available for free, right? It tells you the approximate time, classroom discussion, and grade level word count. And yeah, I think it's important. It really helps with like critical thinking, analysis, and being comfortable with discussing, things in general in life. I think it's important. It's a good skill to have, discussion, debate, and things like that, right? And assessing what happened in a story, right? A short story, right? Yeah. So Yeah, they have book club suggestions even, right? And fun to read stories and discuss with others. So I do so like durian. So yeah, they have some really, they published a lot of really cool work. Aliens in Space even, right? Fantasy free award winners, right? One's tied to death and passing, right? Faith and spirituality, gruesome with a twist, children's stories, right? So book club discussions. So I love that they're emphasizing, importance of like meetups, book discussions, book clubs, classroom lesson plans. Yeah, that's really cool. I don't see a lot of literary arts magazines really doing anything like this, so that's really cool that they do that. There's some I've covered right on this podcast that do, have introducing literary arts magazines in the classrooms and things like that for teachers programs. Right, CLMP has a great, lit mag adoption program. 32 Poems has a classroom, facilitation, and other ones out there. Rattle has done some youth-based anthologies, younger writers and things like that. But yeah, so they have a news section, right? An ethics survey. We'll take a look at that soon. So yeah, and yeah. So they have an ethics quiz, a fun quiz here. So some interactive things here on their site. They have a support section, in terms of advertising. So yeah, they allow others to advertise with them, and yeah, that's another way, to generate some, you know, to generate support around a publication further for future projects, as I mentioned, right? So banner ad placements with after dinner conversations as of November 2025 is $250, banner ad placement, body text link $100 per week, sponsored content with $1,000 per email. So I think that's nice, again, it shows you that's a way to, besides Patreon, they do have a Patreon, I'll show you that in a bit. Besides Patreon membership plans, beside, pledge subscriptions through Substack, you can create various advertisement placements for your publication, right? If you start one, could be web based, it could be in a newsletter, it could be in print, different ad placements happen, so just think about that. It is a nice way to, have money for future projects and publications, or to pay writers for their work and to keep things going. Again, it is really hard for a lot of publishers to sustain funding. So you really have to be creative in terms of memberships, Patreon levels, advertising options, things like that. The publication I run, we haven't really gotten into that. A lot of our book recs sections and recommendations, all of that was free, So, we might restructure things in the future or do some advertising options a little bit further with, the publication I run, Dippity. But just showing you some examples of what's possible, in terms of that. They even do social media advertising, so I don't see a lot of places do this and offer, social media advertising. So that's nice. It says post across all channels, $150 per post series. Sponsored tweets, $75 per tweet, $75 per post. Instagram, $50 per post on Facebook. Blue Sky sponsored, $25 per tweet. So things can change, yeah, and they have with again, fee structures, advertising over time, but typically I've seen places keep it within a range, yeah. So yeah, so they have magazine advertising, full page 750, half page ad $500, quarter page ad 325. They have sponsorship packages, some going up to, it looks like basic is 750, premium's 1,750, exclusive sponsorship $5,000, which includes a full page ad in 3 magazine issues, a banner ad in 12 weekly emails, and 10 social media posts across platforms. So yeah, I think they really, had I think they really showcase a great range in terms of um advertising here, for sure, because I don't see a lot of lit mags and journals do this, like in terms of various advertisement packages this extensively, social media and print and all of that. Every place has that pricing a little bit differently. Obviously, the more subscribers a place has, right, typically they are able to get an ad or content of it in front of more readers, more eyes, right, to on it, whatever's being advertised, right. So yeah, so yeah, that's awesome that they have these advertising options. Again, another way publications can support themselves or sustain it, right, through advertising, options, magazines. typically publishers do a lot of advertising, and it's a way to, again, help sustain the publication and cover expenses and things like that, continue series, and yeah, and pay writers for their work. So yeah. Um, so we have donation, right? 501c3, Patreon. They have gift card options too. Merchandise. We'll check out the gift card here in a bit. So yeah, they have a fun merch shop too. Most places I've seen do have, some sort of merch shop, yeah. Um Gift card. Let's take a look at the gift card. So it looks like you can get a 1 year subscription, $24.95, digital subscription. There are other ones here below. You can see gift card values and stuff. So that's nice. So let's take a look at their Patreon. I think I have that page up, so I'll just click on it for you guys. So yeah, they have 74 members on their Patreon. I think they also have a section on their Substack as well where this is linked. So yeah, 448 posts. So it definitely helps to have a Patreon, another way to, help sustain a publication, right? And things like that. So let's check out their membership options. Towards the end, if you recall, the very, very end of the Chestnut Review podcast, just an episode back before the previous one, right? I think it was 87, right? So I was showing you at the end the membership tiers of Chestnut Review. Every place is a little bit different in terms of what you get, with these membership tiers. So they have Bias of Virtual Beer, $2 a month, entry supporter level, $5 a month. Entails, some benefits here you can see on my screen. I won't go through all of it, but like magazine subscriptions, right? Early and ad-free podcast access, digital download of season 1 anthology, physical copy of season 1 anthology US only, complimentary paid membership to their Substack. And yeah, they have mid-tier support level, $10 a month. So you can vote on, podcast, their next podcast story for discussion. Get a physical copy of the anthology of your choice, US only, all entry supporter level benefits, early access to new short stories. Then they have a top level supporter level, $25 a month, all other supporter level benefits, and then you get a print copy of monthly magazine, a print copy of the monthly magazine mailed each month to the address of your choice, and a sponsor level, which is $100 a month, all lower tier benefits and shout outs in podcasts and the website. And yeah, so that's nice. Again, I think it helps, if you're going to start, Patreon, there are alternatives to it, but whatever you're going to do, right, I think it helps to see examples. I see a lot of early access, things in Patreons, for publications and membership levels and things like that. So totally, check out, the Chestnut Review episode. I think I shared some other Patreons and other episodes of some of these spotlight episodes, right? So yeah, I've never managed a Patreon. I did create a Patreon, but I never really have used it quite yet. I'm leaning towards it. But yeah, Substack again is another great way others can pledge support to subscribers, right? You can create some bonus paywalled content. It could be interviews or additional things like that. I, for one, don't really like paywalling things and things like that, so I don't really know in regards to that, but we'll see. Bonus content I think is fun to have, if your publication, early access and some other, membership benefits. So you can be really creative with your Patreon, just sharing. So I think that's pretty much it. I went on their podcast. We saw the gift cards. I think the affiliate link, I think that just takes you out to Amazon. I don't know if that link's being updated, but yeah. So that's basically it. Um, they have a customer service, contact option, which is nice. So yeah, most lit magazine journals, right, have a contact section of some kind, so always helpful, so yeah, that's after dinner conversations. So again, I think really cool, again, they're focused on short stories, and yeah. So I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, again, with after dinner conversations, right? The short story should be entertaining, but they should give different readers different perspectives on what the right answer is for each story, right? And yeah, so yeah, so I think it definitely helps to read examples of past short stories they published. I have not, written a short story in quite some time. I mean, I think within the past 3 years, I did submit to a couple places in terms of short stories, but once in a blue moon, I do, send work to places myself. But yeah, I used to write a lot of short stories back in high school. I have a lot of sitting ones, that I haven't like reshared out from like my high school days. And even, back when I was taking, college classes and stuff, I did a lot of, short story writing, a lot of more fiction writing. In the past, 5 years or so, I've done a lot more, I would say, poetry writing and things like that you know but yeah, so I think the emphasis of short stories, that central focus with after dinner conversation is really cool, that they have. I think it's very unique what they do. Absolutely. So I just wanted to take the time to cover it. Yeah. Their monthly short fiction, literary magazine is very cool. Totally pick up some copies of it. I love that they offer, formats digitally and very reasonable costs, wise, I would say. Yeah, so that's after dinner conversation. I don't think I have anything else. I tried to cover as much of the website as possible, but sometimes things change with publications, so always read guidelines carefully. Sometimes submission systems change, stuff like that. But just showing you what they have to date as of November 2025, and just pointing out some things like the Fast Pass, right? Their advertising options, their subscription options, right? They have various, membership tiers, right? And things like that with their Patreon. So I think it helps, if you're going to start your own publication, to take a look at what publications have been out there, have been around for, quite some time, and yeah, and have grown quite, to accumulate a large amount of subscribers, right? And I think that's really cool. Again, what they do, and very, very fascinating, right? That whole aspect of, philosophy, ethics, right? It really again gets your gears turning. When I think it's absolutely important for a piece to make you think, to get you turning. But of course, you don't want to be like overly confused, right? That's the challenge of writing in general, right? You don't want to confuse your reader, but you want to create an impact, right? I covered in this podcast just some excerpts of some flash fiction stories, or even excerpts from, introduction chapters of books, right? Because think about, again, how some books in general, right, start off, right, to capture your attention, right? So I think, yeah, so you totally, I think it definitely helps to read the examples they have, spotlighted, and to pick up past issues, to really get a feel of what they're looking for. I think it's really, again, interesting, that whole trolley problem and allegory of the cave. That focal point, to take in consideration, the various scenarios, and things to think about ethically, right? In terms of decisions and choices, and things in general tied back to life. And yeah, I think short stories are very important, and short story fictions, right? I think, I picked up, over the years as a kid, when I go to bookshops, right, with my fam. Sometimes I pick up those books that would have back to back mini stories in them. I love those, right? Those short story fictions, over the years, and yeah, I think I still have some. But yeah, I haven't written any new short stories in quite some time myself. So maybe a challenge for myself, guys. We'll see. I was thinking about continuing one short story I shared through Dippy, I think, right? Pompeii Pigeon. Right? I have some fun names for some of my work. I think one short story I wrote that was one I really took the time way, way back when I was younger, right? Was When the Time Goes, right? Ebook version of that. That one I would say was one of my faves I wrote when I was younger. It wasn't philosophy or ethical, I guess. It was a time travel short story inspired by the Time Machine, movies and time traveler movies, right? I shared in this podcast, but yeah, short stories rock. Again, fiction short stories. There are publishers out there, again, that do a mixture of, different types of publications, right? But I think, it's really nice to see, after dinner conversation really highlight the importance of short stories and discussions, for long discussions, right? And to really get thought provoking conversations, because I think when we discuss our work, we learn from it, we can reflect, we look back on it. Even others can learn from, short stories and things like that, right? They have, again, classroom learning lesson plans, right? I think it's important, right, to discuss, again, not just short stories, but books, writing, art, all the things we do in life, to really have discussion around it. Yeah. And short stories, several have impacted me over the years. I was gonna try and share with you guys some short story recommendations to check out, but I don't think I will on this podcast. But yeah, I am a fan of short stories. I love reading them. Dippity, this year with the Lit Mag I read, we've been mostly focused on flash fiction pieces this year, and it was really cool to see, the submissions that came through this year on those thus far. We're getting closer to the end of the year, and restructuring things at the publication. So we'll see how things go. In terms of like our website and stuff, I'm still, thinking about things as we change the direction and shift things over. Yeah, maybe a ways off because, I might have some things coming up here. But, anyways, I try to do these when I can. And I hope you enjoyed this episode or took something away from it. I think it helps to see different layouts of websites, the structure of submissions, FAQ pages, if you're going to start your own Lit Mag journal, or if you're a submitter, I think it helps to really, keep in mind, right, things to take into consideration. And, when you're, prepping your submission to a place, right, always read the guidelines, always read, past issues or samples of work they published in the past, things like that. Yeah, so that's After Dinner Conversation. Check out their Substack. I didn't really dig around on it a bunch for you guys. Their Substack, we can see they have a lot of really cool Q&As they do. And yeah, so bite-sized interviews they do, so they have some of these for subscribers only paid, right? So yeah, it's not too bad, in terms of that, the cost of, subscribing and things like that. I think they are definitely one of the more friendly cost friendly magazines out there, in terms of their subscriptions and things like that. Yeah, so that's basically it. So check out After Dinner Conversation. If you're someone who loves short stories, right, this is probably the place for you to check out. Yeah. And yeah, I again really love short fiction, and reading that. Longer pieces, yeah, I like reading longer pieces from time to time, but I think it's really interesting to see, short stories, right? You really have to, again, the challenge with those is creating an impact with just in a short amount of, you don't have a lot of, as I mentioned, this podcast, a lot of room to work with, right? You don't have like 30 pages or anything like that, right? You're working with, right? Their call was like what, 7,000 words maximum, up to 7,000. I think it was showing on Chill Subs, but really they said to, again, focus right on but yeah, again, they said to focus on, I think it was like what, 2,500 to 4,000 words. It could be wrong, but yeah, you can listen back to that in the podcast where I said that. So they have the same content in their Substack, by the way, as the magazine. Just keep that in mind. And yeah. So yeah, some places do reshares through Substack. That's totally okay, and yeah, having identical content, print, digital, I think it helps to some people like reading through the Substack app or on the web, Substack. Some people like ebooks, some people like print issues. So I think it's really nice to offer options again. Yeah, so that's cool, yeah, so I think Substack's really great for reshares. And you could do a mirror of your publication reshares and share some Q&As, interviews, and things like that, additional content too. But yeah, so that's it, guys. Take care and bye. Next episodes we might do some submitter type questions, just fun questions and stuff like that. And I might, if I have time, do one more publication or two before the end of the year. Spotlight episode. We'll see what I have, time to do. And then probably we'll take a break, very, very long break. I know I said I was going to take a break earlier. I was just trying to do as many episodes before the end of the year because I know definitely, the holidays are coming up right soon here, and my birthday is also not super soon, but in January, right? And then I have other, events and stuff, and then I'm going to try and possibly restructure things with the deputy and the publication, or thinking about other things too that ahead. So yeah, and possibly taking a break from things, and also myself looking for work and stuff. So and some fam events and things. So it's a lot going on, but yeah, I do these when I can in downtime. It helps, me too, and I hope it helps you, these episodes that I'm doing, yeah, so maybe in the next episode I will share some of places I've had work accepted, and just talk through like what my thought process was behind each piece, the backstories of them, me trying again with some places and leading to acceptances, or what I did differently the second time, or things like that. It may help you, if you're a submitter. So yeah, we'll do that, and then maybe a couple fun submitter questions I have here, that just general questions. I'll see if I have time to cover those before the end of this month. And if I drop off, just know that, totally follow the episodes wherever you're listening to, right? It helps more see the episodes if you think the series benefits anyone, right? You totally can comment, do a thumbs up, like, rate it, wherever you're listening to. Don't forget. Yeah, because it totally may help others. That's the whole point of the series. I've put together some, typed out things, lists for submitters on my Substack. Not a bunch yet, but maybe I'll circle back to that. Even, ways to find, I recently did like a post on, recently how to find, more calls for submissions, the various submission management systems out there for, editors and publishers, right? And just some other things, to keep in mind, when submitting. And I'll try to do more of those when I get a chance, but there may be no new episodes for quite some time after this year, I'm thinking. So yeah, just keep that in mind. But totally, if the episodes are helping, you can totally comment. It helps me, and yeah, and I hope, again, yeah, take care, and I'll see you in the next episode. Yeah, take care. Yeah. P.S. guys, just an additional few notes here that I want to point out and circle back to before officially signing off. I tend to tack things on towards the end that I think of or want to mention again. So, yeah, in terms of after dinner conversations, agreement, sample one, I just want to, state here that I really like that they have this in their sample, right? It has, is this your first time being published? Yes or no? And I think that's great that they have that there. From an editor's perspective, there are absolutely quite a few, nomination events out there, tied to short stories, fiction, even, where they only take nominations from, writers who it was their, first ever time being published, their debut short story, right? And yeah, so I don't see a lot of places have that. So I think that is really a good idea to do, it doesn't necessarily always have to be in agreement. There are ways to do, forms and, check boxes, and to have, yeah, you can have, agreement letters attached back to decisions and things like that with various submission managers. But yeah, I think this is a nice, reminder to others that there are, a lot of, nomination award events out there, that editors can enter work, that was accepted or published. And if it was, especially, right, a debut work, and a writer's first ever time being published. So I think that's great to have, to be aware of that, if it, even for poetry, right? I'm talking about that too. So think about that. You can of course take a look at the sample agreement they have. Other editors I've seen have shared sample agreements from time to time. If you are a member of CLMP, right, I think a lot of editors are totally willing to share their, agreements, what they have, or to help you draft that even. I think that's really nice about the CLMP membership, right? So don't forget to listen to the CLMP membership, episode. There's two episodes. One of them I'm touring the website. The other is just audio, over the benefits, right, of joining that membership again. So yeah, I think that's great that after dinner conversation shares in advance what that looks like. So submitters are aware of, like, yeah, this is what you're going to get upon acceptance. The pay amount, what all of that entails. Rights, for your work and all of that, right? Yeah. And one more thing I want to cover here. So in regards to the fast pass, I discussed that. Yeah, it's on the higher end, and they even have in their FAQ on it, right? Yeah, that seems like an odd amount, right? Others would probably that would raise that question, but again, they're stressing that they really are using that to help support the publication, keep the lights on. Every bit helps, right? And yeah, 100% of the money goes to supporting right after dinner conversation, an independent literary publisher. So yeah, you also get a fast response with that. That's awesome. Not with after dinner conversation in terms of waiting like a year or something like that. To date, I think they said right they get a decision back within 2 to 3 months. But you can skip the line with a fast pass, which is really nice. I know some places, right? Some places totally you have to wait 6 months or more, like a very long time throughout the year to get a decision back. So it's really nice. I think places that have fast passes or skip the line, skip the wait, if you're someone who likes to get fast decisions, right? And yeah, so I don't know about refund policies or anything like that in terms of this fast pass if they don't meet that 3 to 5 business days, or if it happens to be longer than that. I don't know about that. I know most places I've seen do give refunds on that. I'm not sure about that. I didn't see that. Maybe I missed it somewhere. But anyways, yeah. So, I think fast passes are nice. Dippy, again, we have a splash pass because I sort of wanted to make it water themed, or, sort of we have, I guess for a while we have like a sort of surf vibe going, or water themed, or pool splash. I did some art tied to that. So that's why I call ours the splash pass. You could call it something else, totally. Right. Yeah, you can be fun with the nicknaming of that, skip the line pass or fast pass, right? Most places call it a fast pass, or skip the line option. And yeah, so yeah, I think that's great that they have that. And then I want to mention, again, I think submission forms, yeah, they're nice to have, but I think what I really like about submission management systems rather than just intake forms is that you could really collaborate with other readers, in terms of like chatting with them, messaging one another, and submitters can also see statuses on their submission. They can essentially keep track of all their work in one place. With every place is on pretty much a different submission man system. A lot of places, of course, right, use Submittable, but I think Subfolio is going to continue to grow, so I really like Subfolio, right? So totally listen back to those episodes on Subfolio, or even episode I think 56, or the overview episode on the various submission man systems out there. I also have an outline on the ones I'm aware of in terms of submission management systems, intake forms, different ways to set up, fields for submitters, right? And the benefits of having, submission management system like Subfolio, right? But yeah, so everything, in terms of after dinner conversations, website is very organized, easy to find. I didn't have trouble, finding anything. I always make a comment that it's always nice, if a website, if a lot of publications has a search, of some kind. I didn't go through all of the submission pages, I don't believe, for you guys, but they do have more information on reader notes, if you choose that option, right? They have each submission reviewed by 2 internal readers, right? And who score it, and give notes and comments. And you can choose to have, I think, those comments shared, right? So they have examples from their readers and things like that. I think that's nice. We may totally do this too. In terms of giving examples of like what it would look like, with that additional reader comment share option. We only introduced that, this year, sharing reader comments and scoring. And yeah, it's totally, some submitters have liked that. And it's a, additional fee for that. We don't have fees at Dippity Lit Mag, right? So there's an additional fee for those reader shares, scoring shares. They can get either just their score or their comments as well, together. So yeah, so I think there are totally additional ways you can implement for submitters, right, to have feedback, critiques, or to have reader note shares or comment shares. So really nice to see those examples. And then it goes into, again, reader notes, feedback, critique. Again, is $65. It's optional for all of that, and yeah, again, I mentioned, on this podcast, what my range I think is kind of high for feedback and critique. But after dinner conversation, right, they're stating again they're not a vanity press, and that isn't their main source of funding, right? The feedback and critique, right? And yeah, they have a high demand and quoting off their site for this feedback service, and they, really, really it sort of reduces the number of requests so they don't get buried. It states here, right? So yeah, and other places I've covered in the podcast, they've also had, fairly high ranges in terms of feedback and detailed critiques. I'm not really sure the length of the feedback and critique, if it's, that, but yeah, if it's 2 pages max or 3 pages, or how long that feedback or critique is. Some places on the podcast I showed you, they have the option of private consultation and feedback, or they have a dedicated team member do that, right? Like with Chestnut Review. But I think it's really nice to see places offer additional feedback and critique and to really take the time to do that. Yeah, it could be, for $65, it's on the higher end, the fast pass. But for some, it's totally worth it, to get a fast response, to skip the line, skip the wait. I think waiting's really hard for a lot of writers and artists even. And, it's totally, when I started out submitting places, yeah, did I choose a fast pass option from time to time? Totally did, they were a couple bucks, for some places, but yeah, I have not, I'm not sure what feedback and critiques look like for, most lit magazine journals. Every place is a little bit different. Some places give back, 2 pages or a set number of paragraphs to you in terms of feedback, or, things like that, from the editor, or, have dedicated team members do that. But again, they have reviews on, their feedback, critiques. Even you can see some ratings on chill subs with some lit mags and journals now, in terms of, how others felt in regards to the feedback they received. I think, again, feedback is really valuable. Of course, a lot of writers, prefer to get free feedback, right? No fees. But it does take a lot of work for editors, for team members on a literary publication, right, to do that, absolutely. So, yeah, and it goes towards supporting the publication. So, yeah, so I've seen, I think the past couple episodes with you guys that I've done, right, in terms of spotlight under the slide episodes, right. Yeah, we've seen, feedback critiques being 60 something, right, and on the higher end. I've seen some lit mags journals even have $75, feedback and critiques, it's and things like that. But yeah, there are places out there, that have $20 feedback, and, various feedback. Some give free feedback, with submissions. Not all places. It takes time to do that. A lot of times places have to, catch up to do those things, and it can take time. Sometimes places totally can get a flood of feedback requests. So, yeah. And then some publishers, right, they pay their staff even, the work they're doing in terms of, feedback and critique, too. But yeah, anyways, yeah, so I'm just, sharing additional thoughts here. But yeah, the website of After Dinner Conversation, everything's easy to find. I think it's, it'd be nice if there was I think a search of some kind. But yeah, it looks like there's a login option as well. And yeah. So in terms of the name, I sometimes share, my thoughts on names or any memories tied to, lit magazine journals, or what they make me think of, right? So after dinner conversation, so I don't know about you guys, but growing up as a kid, totally, I would, sit at a dinner table with my parents, my mom and my dad, right? We'd have dinner together. Then at some point in time, I can't remember when, we got rid of that dinner table. We actually had that in the basement, by our like washer and dryer. It was kind of used for just like stacking things on top of it. And then we, had in our family living room, right, back in Minnesota, right, we would have these like TV dinner trays, foldable ones, flip open ones, and we eat on those tables. We had, a raising, lowering table and stuff like that, but I think that got eventually gave out, and so for more room and space, for I eventually, got chihuahuas growing up, and things like that. So, the table was taking up a lot of space and stuff where it was located and all of that. But yeah, we totally ate together. We had those TV trays, together, and would eat, yeah, our dinner. And after dinner, yeah, we would talk about mostly movies, I think, and other things. And I grew up watching a lot of movies with my parents always. We would sit down, with dinner and after dinner, talk about the movie and watch movies together, all kinds, sci-fi, adventure, TV shows. There were several series, I mentioned this podcast, I'd sit with my folks and watch, my mom and I, right? We watched like Ink Master together. Although we don't have tattoos, right? I was always still am. I was just catching up to Ink Master the other day. Huge fan of like the artistry behind that. I myself have over the years drawn contestants for fun, just done like fan art stuff way back, and I think the designs and the challenges are really cool. And yeah, and artwork itself tells it can inspire short stories and things like that, and things like that, right? Get your gears turning. Project Runway, I'd watch that. My mom, Survivor, CBS. My folks and I used to watch, not anymore, Amazing Race, the round where they travel around the world, and yeah, and then various like baking cake shows with my mom we would watch, on Food Network, and competitions. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. So, those would typically, lead to conversations, right? And things like that. So what I'm getting at is anything we come into contact with, it could be movies, it could be a book, a short story, an excerpt even of a poem, right? Those can all, lead to some form of discussion. Maybe not a rather long discussion, but it can lead to discussion, right? I like how after dinner conversations, like, short stories for long discussions, and how they have meetups, events, and even have those classroom lessons, and yeah, the book club suggestions, the meetups, the hosted events they're doing, the podcast episodes they've done. They have a YouTube channel you can check out too. Foglifter, by the way, on the past episode, they have a YouTube channel, Chestnut Review, I believe, as well. So totally be sure to subscribe to those YouTube channels, support, the literary arts magazines. It's hard to get, channel subscribers on YouTube, I've seen, for a lot of lit magazine journals. So you just got to keep at it, right? Yeah. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. That's after dinner conversation. Again, super awesome what they're doing. Short stories. I'm a huge fan of short stories. If you've never written a short story before, or you're thinking about it, totally try. And you have to, I think in your lifetime, you have to try writing a short story, once in your lifetime. Perhaps, I don't know if it's going to fall in line with what after dinner conversation is looking for, but, totally try it, challenge yourself if you've never written a short story before, or finished writing a short story. um, I would say I have, again, a lot of like half baked, like YA long, stories, book length ones that I wanted to do. But yeah, I've written a lot of short stories in high school, and ones that I've tried to reshare just for fun, in ebooks and stuff. Um, a lot of them, my high school ones, I mentioned this on the podcast. Someone actually rated one of my high school stories from like way, way back, which is like, I think it was like over almost 15 years old. That story I wrote, and it was like they gave it like 2 stars. I was like, well, they read it. That's awesome. So, anyways, everyone, is going to, have different thoughts on your work and stuff like that. But I think in terms of when you're submitting the Litmax journals and publications, I think it really is important to read the publication, to familiarize yourself with it. So totally don't forget, to grab that sample, a free digital sample that after dinner conversation has. Check out their Substack. Again, they mention it's basically, a mirror of their publication too. So, yeah, but they have a lot of subscribers. So right, I think it said 100 or 150,000, right, or something. Yeah, so it's continuously growing. It's awesome. So totally check out their Substack, and check out more of after dinner conversation. I did my best to, give you a tour of most of the pages. But yeah, always double check the guidelines no matter what you hear me say, and just, double check the pages and all of that. Sometimes submission intake systems change with lit magazine journals. So I'm just showing you everything as I see as of November 2025, and the site and layout, and discussing it. So I hope this episode helped you, seeing, these examples of, various lit magazine journals. Again, next couple episodes, I'll try and, maybe share some submitter type questions, editor type questions too, on both sides. Again, so yeah, yeah. So take care, guys. That was my PS note. I know this was a longer PS note, but just wanted to tack on those notes. And yeah, take care. Yeah. Bye. Yeah.